All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Rowan Neufeld. I coordinate events for McNally Robinson Booksellers in Saskatoon. From this end, we're streaming live from Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Plains Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota. Treaty 6 is, of course, the homeland of the Métis Nation, one of Saskatchewan's founding peoples. And I am just really pleased to welcome you all to the virtual launch of Girl Running by Diana Hope Tegenkamp. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Before we begin, I have a couple of Zoom housekeeping notes. I've enabled live auto captions tonight, which you can access by clicking the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. There's also a Q&A button to submit questions for Diana. And we'll have some time at the end of the night to answer your questions. So in the meantime, please feel free to use the chat function to pass on your congratulations. I would also like to pass along thanks to Thistledown Press for working with McNally Robinson on this event. And on behalf of Thistledown Press, we'd like to thank Sask Arts, the Canada Council for the Arts, and the Government of Canada for its publishing program. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest host for the evening, Tea Gerbeza. Tea is a bi-disabled poet, writer, editor, and multimedia artist creating in Treaty 4 territory in Regina, as well as on the homeland of the Métis Nation. Tea's work has appeared in Release All the Words Stuck Inside of You 3, Room Magazine, Anti-Lang, and Spring, among others. And we're pleased to have her here tonight to introduce Diana, and they're going to have a conversation a bit later as well. So welcome, Tea.
Thank you so much, Rowan, for that wonderful introduction. And it's my honor and great pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Diana Tegenkamp, to you all today for the launch of Diana's incredible debut poetry collection, Girl Running. Diana Hope Tegenkamp is a Métis writer who lives and creates on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis. Diana's writing has appeared in numerous Canadian literary journals, including CV2, Grain, Matrix, and Prairie Fire. Diana's first poetry book, Girl Running, completed with Canada Council for the Arts and Saskatchewan Arts Board grants, published by Thistledown Press, launches tonight. Birthmark and Motherfield, two poems from Girl Running, were longlisted from the 2020 CBC Poetry Prize. Diana's poem, My Father as Rhythm in Lake Water, received second prize in the Banff Centre Bliss Carmen Poetry Prize and can be read in the current issue of Prairie Fire magazine. Many Good Places, Rediscovering the Métis and Settler Place Worlds of My Parents, Diana's second in-process poetry manuscript, is supported by a Sask Arts Access Copyright Foundation Marion Heb Research Grant. Unmute, Warm-Ups for Body Vocality, a video performance piece, was showed as part of Slant's 2021 Writing Bodies event in the UK. All the Words I Couldn't Say, a film poem based on a poem by Nicole Brassard, is a 2021 official selection in the Berlin International Art Film Festival, the New York International Women's Festival, the Toronto International Women's Festival, and the Montreal Independent Film Festival. So many good things happening. Join me in welcoming Diana.
Thank you so much, Tea. I can't believe we get to talk to each other and enjoy a conversation this way with other people just listening to us chat. It's great to have you here, and I thank you so much. I also want to thank Rowan and McNally Robinson. It's truly a thrill for me to have you hosting the event. I want to say thanks to Thistledown Press, to Liz, to Carolyn, to June, and to Emily for all your help with getting this book published. And I want to say a very special thank you to Anne Simpson. Anne was my manuscript editor, and she worked a kind of a magic that it was just wonderful to have her with me at that stage of the journey. And last but not least, I just have to say thank you to all of you out there. I am so thrilled that you're here with me tonight for this reading and for the conversation with Taya. So without further ado, I'm going to briefly set up my first poem. So the first poem is called The Ark. It is from a section of the book called Each Breath an Oar, which actually is in the middle of the book. And I like to think of this section of the poetry book. I always call it a romantic interlude. So there's a lot of serious themes and issues in the book. And this takes place right in the middle, and it's sort of a little bit of a respite from that. So I'm going to read from The Ark. And this also gives us, it brings us together. It gives us, I hope, a sense of place through dreaming. So we can start out that way in a more gentle way. The Ark. Sleep is not farmland. It has no boundary. Sleep is wind passing through and round houses and barns, passing round and over things in formation and form does not matter. Nothing but sleep and dreaming. Nothing, just wind, sleep, and this dream, blurred deer in field at side of road. Sleep is wind, passing over deer in field, wind-blurred windshield. Your hands release the wheel and the van drifts towards the horizon, where land, softened by blue dusk, becomes the sea. To row in the dark, each breath an oar. In the dark towards the barn, lowing moan, calf slipping from its mother's body, birth fluids that you smear on the cow's muzzle. To see yourself, bent form kneeling in straw, to see the cow move toward her newborn, but not to see it, round you, round the barn, its gray surround, each breath an oar, yet breathing does not pull it forward. Small boat bobbing, bed afloat, and blue horizontal sluice of light, blue passing, a retinal scan over this body on the bed. How strange to dream, not asleep, to float, to reach the flow of sleep and from the well draw breath. Horizon not yet land, blue pooling, giving way. You're awake, God says. And already you're forgetting the sea and that something floating through it all. How could you not? Thumbprint moon, eggshell sky, birdsong through the open window. I'm now going to share with you one of two film poems I'll be sharing this evening. And following this film poem, it's short, it's 2 minutes long. I'm going to read the related poem in the book that comes from, that I drew from for this film poem. So I won't say too much about the film poem, it will speak for itself. It's here to set a mood, and it establishes the theme of running. There is no moon tonight, but nights, not
always moonless. See, I've been watching the moon, how it grows full, then new, appears to hold still, doesn't. She told me how, in grade 1, she ran away again and again. Loved to tell about her grandfather returning to the house after walking her to school, only to find her already back, sitting on the couch as he came through the door. She told me how she was instructed to mouth the words to songs in the school choir because she sang out of tune. Songs and cries held in, not voiced. Our highway of tears and starlight tours. Victim impact statements. Seismic beneath tar sands, deep-rooted through winter. Mouth moving as it forms each vowel and consonant.
The text from that film poem comes from one of the first poems in Girl Running called Little Winters. And this poem really establishes my mom as the central presence in the book. A bit of background, my mom was diagnosed in March of 2011 with internal eye melanoma. So this poem is situated around thinking about that. And it also takes my mom's personal stories and starts to draw these connections to current social realities and history. I guess for you as a reader, but you're a listening reader tonight, I encourage you to just sort of float through this. There are some historical references, and it's okay if you don't exactly know them. The one that I would explain a bit, I mention a woman in this poem. Her name is Maria Salguero, and she is from Mexico. She is one of my heroes. What she does is she faithfully, every night after work, tracks on a digital map the places where the murdered women of Juarez, Mexico, the femicides where their bodies have been found. And she does that at great risk to her own safety. So I will mention her. That's one of the people I want you to know in this poem. So here goes, Little Winters. Sparrows thrum in denatured vine, anticipating sunlight. My mother's gaze steadfast, even though winter, its weighted banks, drift inside her left eye, morning seen through snow granules. Steadfast, another gaze, the face of Maria Salguero, glowing white in front of her screen as she marks desert locations on her digital map, all those silent sand dunes, weighted curves. Head tilted, my mother considers southwest ice melt corner, snow accumulation on roof, how to paint a prairie blizzard. Nakaya, too, winter obsessed, created 3,000 photographic plates, snowflakes, his muse. Vapor figures form in the ice along the river's edge after a day of sunny weather. Look, my mother says, look, pointing at their abstract shapes, strangely branching. White blur, snow slippage from roof, and little rabbit behind the vine, attuned to my window-watching presence, gone still. This tendency to freeze in the face of mortality, day suddenly folding in on itself. For 7 minutes, those soldiers held in limbo, slack-jawed beneath a solar eclipse, 585 BC. She told me how, in grade 1, she ran away again and again. Loved to tell about her grandfather returning to the house after walking her to school, only to find her already back, sitting on the couch as he came through the door. Each evening, Maria Salguero pinpoints last moments in the Sonoran and Chihuahuan deserts. Steadfast, all those beloveds. Somewhere beneath karst and hardpan, all those women who tried to run, couldn't get away. That one April when spring withdrew, went in reverse, and I'm crossing the bridge in a snow globe city. My mother opens the front door, snowflakes floating round her, profound as secrets. Winter passing, spring approaches. The last time she shoveled, the neighbor came over. She told him not to worry, said, I love the snow, so clean and cold. Hoarfrost tree ribbons and ice flurries. I can see her running, fast-footed across those fields. She told me how, as a child, she was instructed to mouth the words to songs in the school choir because she sang out of tune. Winter tells no one its business, builds layers of close-mouthed reserves, resilient without commentary. Songs and cries held in, not voiced. Our highway of tears and starlight tours. Victim impact statements, seismic beneath tar sands, deep-rooted through winter. Mouth moving, masking its own silence as it forms each vowel and consonant. Eventually, those soldiers gone still beneath the cosmos, shadowed strange, called it quits, went home, and Nakaya, in love with snowflakes, turned to frost heaving. Outside the window, January floats. I search for signs. Sudden cures can't help it. Peripheral drift in my mother's left cancer eye. Her vision, a wind-tossed sea. Morning light on building. Reverse Titanic rising.
I could listen to you read that poem over and over again. How powerful an end, a reverse Titanic rising. That image is just incredible in its meaning and its sort of, destruction, but also in sort of this hopeful image of desire and all the good things we're going to talk about today or tonight. But I was wondering, Diana, Ink Girl Running with all its dreaminess and abstraction, The book also dwells a lot in place and finds these place worlds. Could you speak to what places the speaker is in, or that the book is in, or that you were in when you were writing the book?
Yes, thanks, Taya. And thanks for your comments too about the reading. That's so nice. I mean, we all are in place. And for me, the central place in the book, or one of the places that continues to be there, is of course the prairies. It's where I live. So the landscape, you know, girl running, moving through the landscape. But I think the most primary place in the book is really the mother, the mother's presence, the mother's history, the mother's body. And eventually when that person's body and life is gone, it's what I then have now called the mother field. So an invisible but very powerful presence that I live in, and that I feel really is what moves through this book. So that for me is the primary place, is the mother field.
Wonderful. And it's interesting too that you have the word field in there, this sort of wide open space that depending on the field could, you know, either if it's a prairie field, you know, you can see miles into the distance. So I think that metaphor just within that word itself, like really speaks to the movements of this book, moving through place and time, and trying to find, I think, oneself and how we relate to our grief too. Really, really powerful stuff.
I appreciate that comment, Taya, because it makes me think of another thing about place. I mean, place is also full of danger, you know, and we have women in this book and in real life running through fields to escape danger. So for me, I guess that field in a way is very ambiguous, you know, and it's not meant just to be a romantic, comforting space. It really is an open space of all different kinds of possibilities.
Would you care to read some more of your poems?
I'd love to. I'd love to.
We'd love to hear them.
So I'd like to read, just so everyone out there sort of knows what's coming up. I want to read 4 more poems, and then I'm going to show the second film poem. So this next set of poems, the first 2, I have to say a thank you to a couple of people in relation to these poems and just my poetry in general. I have to thank Randy Lundy. I had a wonderful opportunity earlier this year to do some mentoring with him through Saucy, and these specific poems, the ones I'm going to read, were the poems that he helped me with. So I really appreciated that help that I got, and I think they made the poems better. It's from a section called Birthmarked, which actually deals with both my mother and my father. I'm just going to read the parts about my father, my Métis father. I really want to foreground that in this part of the reading. So thank you, Randy, for your editing help. And I also have to thank Maria. Thank you, Maria Campbell, for teaching me about my dad and helping me to start to learn about these things. A lot of what's in the poetry is a combination of what I understand to be fact and also what I need to imagine. So Birthmarked. That plume of sound, night's ancestral keening. D.H. Lawrence calls them terrifying, the underdeeps, because they are not known. When I'm wakened by my dad doing his hiya, hiya, hi from the grave, I'm not scared. I'm dumbfounded. Wind stirred dust from ditches the night he was taken, slouched against hard vinyl car seat, low moon and his mother's face merging in stuttered sleep. After beatings, they let him go and he sought the blue spruces behind the school. Looking up through branches, darkness run through with bright patches, she came to him then, summer burnished, gap-toothed. Time, its weight and wing, he stitched to his shoe, intermittent flight. That afternoon, he dreamt rabbit tracks in snow, loping marks leading to the clearing's edge. In 1 hour, winter passed. In minutes, grief pooled from him, spring melt. Curtain lifts, he's there, humming some wordless tune as he gets out of the Pontiac, heads towards her tent. Dawn's swift hour is a sanctuary lamp by which he sees this love is mute, though its trick was to have him think otherwise. Her hands on his face. When to speak, when to listen, these things fall away. Not this mother love. Its self-same tree-line edge forms and reforms within him. Clouds. My father's green Pontiac, carrying him north over highways and gravel roads, low horizon binding dark to day and day to all those foolscap sheets in a vinyl suitcase on the back seat. Dreams he knew could be better than the dreamer. Sure, he abandoned the cause, yet he kept writing and visiting his mother in the tent by the nuisance grounds until he died in that hotel room. Quick, I'm told, his burial. In the spare room, photographs, handwriting on the back, names I don't know. The light has shifted, bare branches, tubes of gold, tubes of light traveling towards the sky. Dusk beyond the pine trees and his mother's expression, an impasse. Then she cut off her braids. Later in poems, phrases and words underlined, his shock came to the surface. This was 1958, but already the 60s, windblown, had found him. After her funeral, moments returned in brief flashes here and there. He gathered these smallest parts of her inside him. To cry might release them, so he drank, a reverse river of grief that kept her close. Strange how the wind can disperse thought, lift monuments of tenderness buried in darkness. Yet the submerged world isn't life. Life is breath and waking. The Czech poet says, I am here. I look at the vase of white zinnias on my computer table. The color white always makes me think of my sister, her urgency, its bright flame. We were listening to Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now. Kids running in and out, walls freshly painted blue. Closeness doesn't require the hush of night or deep talk. I used to color her hair like the sun in an autumn afternoon. Today's sky is gray and blue. Why speak to the dead? Let them return in dreams if they must. This morning, go down to the river, touch the tree trunks, and tell the clouds, I see you. I'm now going to read one of a series of poems that is in the book that recurs throughout the book. There's 3 of them. They all have exactly the same name. They're called Loop. And I have to say here that they are inspired by a series of poems, soft cell poems by Nicole Broussard in her poetry book, Notebook of Roses and Civilization. So it was a wonderful challenge for me to use Broussard, who's just an amazing poet, as a starting off point for these poems. So I'm going to read to you the first Loop poem. Loop. Invented histories, extinct species of butterflies and languages, branching exile. The rise and fall of piano notes, computers hum, and back roads where the wind blows clean through. Pattern of pink blossoms on my living room chair, and the animal nature of letters, forming, begetting, coupling tactile experience and supple thinking. A century emptied and absolute, the open cavity of your chest. The human species learning to undo the knot of otherness, and the ringing of a cell phone made in Juarez, Mexico. What does the dawn know of dark woods, or the desert where the hands of a girl reach through the air? Somewhere on the Tajapuro River in Brazil, the children tie their canoes to big boats. Outside Saskatoon, a dark-haired woman opens a car door and runs. Close up, our features disappear. How humanity must flee from itself. Every day, I'm writing this letter, standing in front of the sea, no, a wheat field beneath a sky of stars. This year, how much rain will fall? Tell me that. Tell me the rose after it's bloomed and before and the blooming. How its connection, mutual caressing of faces, hands, long after you've risen without the word lavender to describe your footsteps in snow. A woman walking the white bone alley, skein of solitude, entangled in hope and dreaming. I'm now going to read a section that very specifically has to do with my mom's passing. My mom passed on July 24th of 2018. Okay, this section is called The Speed of This Passing. I'm just going to read a portion from it. And I will also read the opening quote by Nicole Broussard, which I love so much. I would say that nothing is too slow or too brief for the universe. I would say that naming is still a function of dreaming and of hope. Raven floats oceanic in the sky, glistening wave of black wings now strangely mammoth, stationary on the low branch outside the window, before swooping down to pluck up the dead baby bird I'd asked the neighbor to come and remove. Each day passes. Patiently, night erases itself. I'm not worried about what happens to me after, my mother says. I'm worried about leaving people behind. Sporadic bee on the other side of the screen wants in. I ask the bee for time, still more time. I come inside from raking and fertilizing the lawn. I'll never garden again, she says. My heart is broken, she says. This is a woman who does not make pronouncements. In the doorway, I command the tears in my eyes to retract, like rabbits when they reabsorb their litter. Her body, part here, part elsewhere. Beneath my hands as I massage, skin liquid softness riddled with tumorous lumps. This anatomy of touch is a listening mirror we hold up to the day. If my mother's body were a song, the refrain would be, transform, transform, transform. In the bathroom mirror, she looks up to find her face. Before bed, she sits in the chair looking out onto the garden. We have nesting wrens, a first, and the bark-colored Buddha placed beneath the elm, another first. I want to go, she says. I'm ready. Each time we die, God cleans our brains, my 8-year-old niece announces. I love how children know dying is like air, wind, light, always there, this event, always approaching, existing, longing, impending, becoming. And yet it's June and our eyes seek out the Siberian irises in the backyard. They've grown at least 1 foot in only 2 days. Remember my hand here, touching the corner of the dresser. I will. Keep the lace curtain on the bedroom window. Always. In the backyard, from her wheelchair, watching me do yard work, she reaches out, hands suspended in the air. I don't know what she wants, lean in. She takes my face in her hands. Thank you, she whispers, her face translucent, its expression something beyond sadness, some wordless thing beyond herself, the change she is becoming. Okay, thank you for listening to those 4 poems. It felt really lovely to read them to you. I felt that you were here with me, or are here with me. So thank you for listening. I'm now going to set up the second film poem, and I think you'll find it's going to lift the mood and the energy a bit. This is quite an exuberant film poem that deals with the topic of history. I have a 22-page visual poem section in my book, and this is inspired by that poem. I'm just going to hold up. I want you to see some of the visuals from the book. So This section also uses an 1809 school textbook about history as one of its main reference points. So the film poem really has found its own life. It's drawing from this history poem, but it's also become its own thing. So I'm really, really excited to share it with you. And then I know Tay and I will talk a bit after you see it. So I'm just going to get this going for you now.
History, sinking, wondrous, vaporous, uncertain, fevered, overrun. Beloved, history. A whirlpool sucking in obscure circumstances with a frightful noise. Memory, method, breathing, highways, deserts, bodies, our fellow creatures, mostly women, discarded, others beloveds, disappeared, sometimes found or not, later summed up as acronyms, MMIWG, and etc. Reflections on the errors to be met with in history. Beneath it all, beneath it all, I'm running through chronological haze, each breath an endless mirage. This is history, the dark, euphemistic face of the Euxine Sea. Herod, angel-smitten, worm-devoured. A woman wrapped in a white cloak, a curiously engraved rose on her ring, her long hair falling. Nameless, eventually disappeared. Her unforgivable capacity for translating the weight of empires. Private traumas. Private traumas. Now reflect on mortal wounds, tombs with sublime inscriptions, and grief, real and fictitious. If real, then grief ought not to be limited to time. If fictitious, then grief ought not to be prolonged. Let's ask the knowledge keepers. Oh, when is grief ever not real? Oh, when is a life thousands of lives unfinished, ever finite. And don't forget the scarlet cloaks, worn to disguise flowing blood. Also, the red dresses.
Oh, wow. That film poem, Diana, is incredible. And, you know, I had to wipe away some tears before I turned on my camera. But then that music, again, I was kind of running in my seat as we were doing during one of our practice sessions.
Yes, when we were doing
such a good beat. So being conscious of time, I think that I will ask one question while the audience sort of can think of their own questions, and folks, you can pop them into the chat or the Q&A box, and I will ask a few as we go through the end of the evening here. So Diana, since you've sort of generously given us so many modes tonight, you know, the poetry, and then your mention of the visual poem, and then your film poems as well. I was wondering if you could speak to how all of these forms work together in the book, work separately, and what you love about them, and how they sort of contribute in their own way to the themes present in the book and the thinking that you're doing in it.
Okay. Well, I think I'll start with the poetry. I wanted so badly to write poetry for so long, and I was unable to do so. And quite suddenly in 2009, it's when Anne Simpson was writer in residence at the public library, I suddenly found that I was able to write poetry, and it was out of sheer necessity. So my experience of poetry is not just that it's poetry, written poems per se, but it's really about a kind of a way of thinking and being. And I just found that I needed to explore some things about myself and express some things that it just seemed it was demanded for me that I speak through poetry. So that's sort of the poetry piece of it. That's how I understand poetry. In terms of the other elements connected in this book, the other forms, the visual poem and the film poems, what I love about doing the film poems is, to me, they really centralize voice and sound. So for me, you know, performing a film poem like that, basically getting to put on headphones, speak into a microphone, and hear my own words in that way, I actually really become, I guess, almost like a new reader of my work. It's like as if the poems are given back to me fresh through sound. And it's a really exciting embodied way for me to work with the poetry, with voice, and with the sound. And then the visual, I also love. That was very unexpected. That visual poetry sequence, based around all of these considerations about history, I actually wrote that through my editing process with Anne. She encouraged me to expand a poem. And it went from 1 page to 22. And I think, I mean, Taya, because I know your work too, and I've seen your wonderful visual poetry. So there's something about taking words and transforming them. They are already visual, but transforming them again, extending them and making them almost become strange. I just find it's another way in for me to look at themes and to see things that I wasn't seeing before. So I just really love working across those different mediums. And I'm glad that I was able to share some of that with you and with everyone here tonight.
Thank you so much for that answer. I was writing some stuff down as you were speaking. I love that you talk about how these forms, the poems are given back to you, kind of like a gift, or something that also happens in your book, where it's a dream has something to tell you. It feels almost, by making it strange, it's almost like those dreams that are coming to the speaker of the book and sort of introducing something new. And that's such a powerful thing. Yeah, I love that idea of the poems becoming strange through these other connected modes of expression. And definitely your talent with your film poems totally brings all of those threads together. So I'm really honored to have been here tonight to witness that.
Thanks. Yeah.
So as we're still kind of waiting for any audience questions, I was wondering if you'd like to speak to how your book works with history, because the 22-page sort of poem is engaging with a historical text, and then also the film poem we just saw has lines from that, but also introduces other parts of history. And I was wondering how you conceive of history in the book and what it's trying to do. Okay. So take that as whatever direction you'd like.
A simple question.
A three-parter.
Well, I think, in terms of my mom's passing, I think, my mom was with me my whole life. So when you know someone, like just starting very personally, and they pass, you suddenly are faced with looking at their life in a different way, a beginning and an end, at least in terms of the physical embodied life. So that for me already started to give me more of an historical sense, just from sensing my mom's life. I myself have always felt very ahistorical. I've always avoided history. I've always avoided social realities. I've just been sort of an ahistorical subject. And I think as I've matured and, with everything that's going on today and wanting to learn more about my own history, I sort of had to try to take history on. And so for me, like working with that found text, that 1809 textbook, there's something about, again, bringing in a strange or an unfamiliar element that kind of destabilizes, I think, at least for me, my perceptions in a way, and allows for openings to then perhaps take a step you couldn't have if you were just always standing on familiar ground. So yes, and so I think the film poem too kind of embodies that history is something profoundly almost monstrous, and at the same time to kind of live with those very harsh realities that we're trying to change, like the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We also need to look at the other side of that, which is the resilience that's there and the exuberance and the joy. So that's kind of how I'm approaching history from those sides. Was that a long enough, complicated enough answer?
Yes. Okay. That was a great answer. Thank you. I can see how I'm loving this sort of theme of taking this sort of strange thing and transforming it almost, and defamiliarizing to sort of open it up, and see where we're sort of placed, and sort of thinking about being ahistorical, but then how we're sort of relating to all of our personal histories, and then also sort of collective and cultural histories. So that's a lot to, unpack in one sitting.
It's a lot.
But so I get to ask another question.
Okay, sure.
So on this sort of same, well, not same, but kind of a big question, which seems to be my specialty. But I wanted to sort of leave us on a hopeful sort of note, and that you also, well, obviously you leave us on because it's your book. But so I was wondering if you could speak to the hope of this book. It felt like there was a desire to reverse Titanic rising, but there was also this sort of sense of hope to know oneself, too, between the grief of the mother and the father, and trying to find oneself within place in history. And I loved those moments of horse wind and bird song in the book. And in the speaker in section 4 of the poem Naming, I loved this line when you write, "If my mother's body were a song, the refrain would be transform, transform, transform." So I was wondering, would you say that this is also the song for the speaker and their hope? Or what is this hope moving us towards? And how does the space of dreams help us get there? And again, take whatever you want out of that question and whatever direction you'd like.
Mm-hmm. Well, hope has always been very important to me. First of all, it's my middle name. And my mom actually wanted to call me by my middle name when I was little. I don't remember this, but I guess I had tantrums and whatnot, so she stopped doing that. But I've always loved that it is my middle name, and I've always been inherently hopeful. Even in the direst of circumstances, I seem to rebound with some hope. I think for me, again, as I've matured, hope becomes less naive, and it does become more placed relative to, life experiences. So I guess what I've learned from my mom's passing, what I've been really forced to accept, is that change is inevitable, and we change, things change, things are in constant flux and constant motion. And it's really by accepting that change, accepting that people change, they grow old, they become sick, they die. Accepting that as a part of a person in their life is really a way to become hopeful, because then you're really being present with what is, So I think for hope, there's always that dreaming space of wishing and hoping, but also to me, hope is very much about being with the movement of life, just accepting those changes.
Generous answer. Thank you so much. So we have time for, I think, one audience question. Right. So Diana, someone asks if you could tell us about your writing process. Is there a time of day that you write more frequently? Where do you write? Could you let us
I would love to. This will make people gasp. I wake up at 3 a.m. because I start my day job at 8:30. So I wake up at 3 a.m. and I do in an intense, 4 or 5 hours of creative work, whether it's writing or the film work. So I do it in the early morning, and I love it because it feels like I'm the only person that's up, and I'm kind of in a secret world and no one else has started their day yet. So that's when I write, and I just love it. And then I know that I've done my creative work for the day. And whatever happens with the rest of the day, I've done that, and it always gets me off on a really good start. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
Excellent. I love that you wake up that early. I think that's such a beautiful commitment to your art. And it speaks to that connection you have with poetry. So Diana, I was wondering if, since we're out of time for questions, if you could sort of lead us out of this launch with one final poem and any sort of wrap up and goodbyes you'd like to say to the audience.
Sure. I'm going to read a shorter poem, and I will also just want to thank everyone for coming. And I want to let you know, Taya, I'll just ask you to come back on screen for just a second, because I want to let everyone know I've also done author designed t-shirts, which Taya is kindly modeling, and bookmarks, and those are available on my website. So if you're interested in those, do check them out on my website. And just thank you so much for being here. Like seeing I haven't been able to look at the chat really closely, but I'm going to look at it later. I understand Rowan's going to save it for me and send it to me. So it's just wonderful to see everyone here. And I'm going to close with, I'm debating between one of two poems. I think I will close with the Loop poem, one of the Loop poems. Loop. After sense of motion in the horizon, the mind going somewhere. Blue wave proximity of stars, words, tenderness. The way the robin calls the early hour, ephemeral and absolute. After intuition flows from dark to earth. After asking what's real, the plenary rustle of leaves at the corner of Fifth Avenue, accidental joy, and the way light flows onto a building before the skies separated itself from the land and the church spire. After we look sideways, not straight on. After history takes us by halves, provocation, tribes, and birch trees in sunlight. The resurrected moon rolling back the gated year. A word's familiar bend when you were comforted. And across the room, hello, pulsating the spine. Reprieve, emptiness, and flickering thought. Lines and enjambments, crossings and dots, worked by hands to replace tree green prairies with words. Stars, vapor, salt, dust, seed, smoke. A beginning, the beginning, or beginnings. After lovers shape the dawn, willful through decades of evolution. Even after what light has seen of you. By this, I mean the fragile geography of connection. Each embodied now, each aphonic purple low-lit cloud skirting the horizon. That lake trout, gleam of eye staring up from the bottom of the milk carton. The cicada, 17 years underground, living for only 3 weeks above. The moment when longing is no longer longing, but something else. Sunlight ephemera on living room walls. The river's leafed estuary. The gutted sky where a raven floats, weightless. Thanks. Thanks so much, everyone.
Wow, thank you so much. Huge thanks, of course, to Diana Hope Tegenkamp for joining us tonight, launching Girl Running, which is available for purchase, of course. And thanks so much to Taya Gerbeza for being such a wonderful host. It was really great to have you both with us and get to hear that conversation. I'd like to also thank Thistledown Press, to all the folks who helped us plan this launch. And last but not least, thanks to everyone who joined us tonight, of course. I am definitely going to send this chat to Diana so Diana can have all of your kind messages forever. And of course, we would encourage you all to purchase a copy of Girl Running from McNally Robinson, either online at mcnallyrobinson.com or in store. We appreciate your support so much and really look forward to hosting events in person again someday, eventually. Until then, please keep an eye on our coming events page to find out more about virtual offerings. And yeah, stay safe. And once again, thanks, Diana and Taya. Have a lovely evening. Take care.
Bye.